There was a time when I was part of an assembly and I had a beloved pastor. I was his closest disciple and learned many things from him. We had full agreement on almost everything in the scriptures, but there were some things that definitely left me confused, to say the least. I made sure to keep myself in check and accept the fact that I'm just unlearned and need to enhance my wisdom and understanding in order to comprehend the teachings I was confused by. And so I did. I went out and studied and studied and studied. I read several books, studied the Bible some more, tested, debated, researched, and examined further. Most importantly, I prayed. The most important thing that my pastor had ever taught me was that in order to have successful discernment, you needed two things. One, you needed to be well read in the scriptures, and two, you must have the Holy Spirit. My conclusion to my research was clear. My pastor was teaching false doctrine, and not just any kind of false doctrine, heresy. I struggled on how I was to handle the situation. At times, I softly questioned the matter just to get a feel of how my pastor would react if I actually presented the information. And even genuine, fair, and honest questions were given a bit of a visceral answering. The day finally came when I started telling him directly that his teaching made no sense and that I just couldn't accept it. I was told that I was an encroacher and a rebellious disciple. I left the ministry, but eventually I did return after my pastor had a sentimental conversation with me saying that, he misses having me around. So I chose to follow the path of love and I returned. I still let him know that I didn't agree with the teachings, and he just asked me to keep it to myself in order to prevent division in the church. I agreed, but it wasn't actually an agreement, it was compromise. I chose to bury the truth in my heart in order to maintain unity in the assembly. What I thought was an act of love would only later be revealed to be the Most High working in the midst of the assembly. As you can expect, listening to the teaching over time provoked me, time and time again. A brother of mine named Max had recently joined the ministry, and he was in total agreement with my findings. He encouraged me behind the scenes to speak and tackle the giant situation, but I didn't have the courage. The spirit was growing in me to speak until I finally had enough and I spoke. I gathered every single elder in the assembly, one by one by one. I called them into the pastor's office. I looked them in the eyes and said that his teachings are heresy, and I want to present my case to the assembly openly. It was an ugly meeting with a lot of back and forth, but the conclusion was that until we set up a time to do so, I would still remain quiet. I agreed to the stipulation. Not even 2 weeks later, my pastor openly confessed to the sin of adultery and the ministry dissolved. Yah will hold his leaders accountable, especially the teachers. And the heresy that my pastor was teaching within the assembly has indeed made its way into Straightway. And so today we will be putting to the test the teacher of Straightway, who for some reason remains in the shadows, is never spoken of, and is never challenged. That teacher is Teacher Shane and his temple teachings. In Christianity, there is a large sentiment that is anti temple, anti Levite, things of this nature. Admit it, many of us skip over the temple sacrifices and what is seemingly mundane commandments that apply to Aaron and his sons. So, when information is presented on the subject that many simply don't study or consider relevant, it can be difficult to convince someone of the magnitude of error they're listening to when someone like Teacher Shane is given the responsibility to teach about the Most High's temple. I hope you all will be willing to give me an opportunity to accomplish this task. In Straightway, Teacher Shane consistently teaches about the temple and its general functions. He additionally often correlates the temple to reflect our current spiritual state in Messiah Jesus. Throughout his teachings, there is a common talking point that he presents to the assembly time and time again. That is his teaching on the Holy of Holies. Teacher Shane believes that we, as believers in Jesus, have now all become priests and are able to access the Holy of Holies because the inner veil of the temple was torn at the crucifixion of Jesus, which is a symbolic representation of our new order.
Oh, beautiful entrance to come to the Father boldly. Boldly. As kings and priests. Just think of the priest before Yeshua came, what they had to witness as they were making offerings for sins. And the people knew their sins, and they had to bring a substitute to die in their place. And you had to sit there along with the priest and watch the priest slaughter it. Watch that knife ring across the neck. Start gasping and choking on its own blood, and it's fighting for its life, and then it moves no more.
The word said, "It is finished." And then upon those three words, this thing was rent. This thing was taken out of the way. To where the presence of Yah was. So we are a body. We are a soul. We are a spirit. And still, even to this day and this hour, the same procession still continues with us. And we move into the realm of the soul as we're starting here, proceeding here to get to here. But there's a veil we got to go through here. That veil has not been taken away. The veil between the soul and the spirit no longer resides there. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Found it as the outer court is. There's got to be a veil there. If you really understand and truly understand what took place when Messiah was on the tree, the veil was rent. The only veil that was rent was the veil rent between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. But there still remained a veil from the outer court into the sanctuary, and that same veil remains today.
You see the order? You see the order? The priest was in the same manner. He had to start out in the outer court, do the services. Then he moved into the sanctuary, did the services there. And then he was able. The one man in the old worldly sanctuary was only one priest. Well, we know. Now, since the second Adam, the second man from heaven has come, taking that veil out of the way, now we can enter in to the Holy of Holies. See, the end result of all this is us tabernacling with Him.
Given that this subject is very deep with much to cover, I've divided his claims into two fundamental parts. The first part is that the veil inside of the temple was torn, and that the second part is that we can now boldly enter into the Holy of Holies as priests. I won't be giving a comprehensive analysis on the entirety of the book of Hebrews, but I will address relevant verses to the topic at hand. At surface level, this may seem like a spiritual teaching that gives us encouragement in our walk with Messiah, but I'm going to submit to you today that this teaching is actually one of the most sacrilegious, blasphemous, and treacherous teachings that can enter into the ears of Israel. Whether Teacher Shane knows it or not, what he's teaching is a mixture of mainstream Christianity and the Melchizedek priesthood heresy. Allow me to explain. In mainstream Christianity and scholarly works, it is one of the most common teachings regarding the temple. That is, to teach that the inner veil was torn and that it is a physical representation of our spiritual reality. It's like a microcosm of the macro, which gives a visual representation of the spiritual walk that we are in with Messiah. I've been to many Christian churches and I've heard Teacher Shane's message preached multiple times in many different ways. There is zero originality in this torn veil viewpoint that Teacher Shane presents. This is taught in Christianity and in its seminaries. Now, the Melchizedek priesthood heresy is a teaching that has infiltrated the Torah keeping community. It is a teaching that was invented by Dr. David L. Perry. The concept of the doctrine teaches that we, as believers of Jesus, have now become Melchizedek priests and that the book of the law and the book of the covenant are two separate things, and only the book of the covenant, which, according to Dr. David, is only Exodus 20 to 24, and these are the only chapters that we are required to obey. David's false teaching made waves throughout the Torah community after David found a popular disciple who would be willing to spread the message around. That disciple is Matthew Nolan from Torah to the Tribes. About 10 years ago, Matthew Nolan became very popular as he began making sermons on the original identity of Judah and how they align with Black Americans. He became even more popular when he began teaching on the Synagogue of Satan and its modern members. As you can expect, the Black Hebrew Israelite community placed him on the trophy cabinet and shared his videos all over the internet, thus making him a very famous preacher in the Torah community. Little did those Israelites know, they were sharing snake poison. This leads me to Straightway. In the past, Straightway had a teacher whose name was Eric Robinson. He's no longer with Straightway, so I cannot point the finger at Teacher Eric and assume he still upholds the Melchizedek teaching, but I can speak of his time at Straightway, where he did, in fact, teach the Melchizedek heresy. I could not find any of his archived videos, but the teaching that I'm referencing consisted of Teacher Eric either on a Shabbat or on a feast day, and he was teaching outdoors in a canopy to the saints. He taught line by line the Melchizedek heresy, how there was a difference between the book of the law and the book of the covenant, the whole 9 yards. I distinctly remember this because the video he made, I had left a lengthy comment in it and got the most likes on it. There were also other comments that said they didn't really understand the teaching either. Those comments were the same reaction that I had when my pastor first taught me it. I know for certain that Teacher Eric, at the time, got the teaching from Matthew Nolan because on his Facebook he would be constantly sharing Torah to the Tribe videos, and Matthew Nolan was the only teacher known to have propagated the teaching at such a high level at the time. Matthew Nolan also infiltrated Jim Staley's Passion for Truth ministries with his Melchizedek heresy, which really spread the fire. But with teacher Eric Robinson, I can only assume that his teaching eventually reached the ears of teacher Shane, who is the topic at hand. I won't say it for certain, but I suspect that teacher Shane is a recipient of this teaching, regardless if he is or isn't, or if he knows it or not, he teaches it. There are varying applications to this Melchizedek heresy. Jim Staley has his own little remix to it, and Matthew Nolan implements Black Hebrew Israelites into the mix in order to give a special flavor. But regarding Teacher Shane, I cannot honestly sit here and accuse him of only keeping Exodus 20 to 24. But I will address his false teaching that we are Melchizedek priests. Teacher Shane has never openly come forward to correct the record, which is his duty as a teacher. So I am only left to believe that he is in agreement with this specific element of the Melchizedek heresy. It is mind boggling how much error there is in this false teaching that I don't even know where to begin. Perhaps one day I'll write a lengthy book to dismantle this disgusting doctrine in depth, but I've already boiled it all down at a fundamental level. That's because I just so happen to be an editor of one of the Melchizedek Heresy books written on the subject. My pastor that I mentioned wrote one, and I was the editor of the book. It is one of the greatest shames I've ever done in my life, but I've repented for it, and I will do all that I can to prevent it from being spread. So I just so happen to be extremely well versed in this false doctrine from the inside and out. Every nook and cranny that this false teaching has, I visited and tested, whether it's the book of Hebrews, Romans, Exodus, First Kings, Galatians, or Revelation. I have examined it, and I am prepared to defend the honor of my king against anyone who tries to stand against the truth. And while I always encourage my audience to go and test things, I cannot, in good conscience, tell my audience to go and read the material on these Melchizedek teachings. I cannot force you, but I just highly, highly do not recommend you waste your time. Just take the teaching at face value. It teaches that Exodus 20 to 24 is all you need to obey from the Torah. Does that sound right to you? Well, there's your answer. Save your time. So now let's address the first part and test Teacher Shane's belief that the inner veil of the temple was torn. Teacher Shane uses the book of Hebrews and Matthew 27 as his primary sources for his temple teachings on the inner veil being torn. Matthew 27, verses 51 to 54. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs were also open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." The Bible indeed says that the veil was torn. There is no disagreement here. The question, however, is which veil was torn? As you've seen already, Teacher Shane consistently repeats himself that the inner veil was torn at the crucifixion of Jesus. This is completely false. Please allow me to explain historically and biblically. Historically, the outer veil is confirmed by Josephus, the letter of Aristeas, and it is additionally described in multiple places of the Mishnah. If you are one who rejects the Mishnah in its entirety, we still have three witnesses, including the Bible, available for your consideration. In Josephus, it says the following: But before these doors there was a veil of equal largeness with the doors. It was a Babylonian curtain embroidered with blue and fine linen and scarlet and purple, and of a contexture that was truly wonderful. Nor was this mixture of colors without its mystical interpretation, but was a kind of image of the universe. In the letter of Aristeas, it says the following: The style of the curtain, too, was thoroughly in proportion to that of the entrance. Its fabric, owing to the draught of wind, was in perpetual motion, and as this motion was communicated from the bottom, and the curtain bulged out to its highest extent, it afforded a pleasant spectacle from which a man could scarcely tear himself away. And if you want to examine the Mishnah, the sources are Yoma 5:1 and Shekalim 8:4 to 5. Now, let's examine the true source, the Bible. Exodus 26, verses 36 and 37. You shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent, of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen, embroidered with needlework. And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia, and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 bases of bronze for them. This verse in particular references the tabernacle, but the outer veil was also kept in the making of the temple. We now have established both historically and biblically that the second temple in the time of Jesus did indeed have an outer veil. Let us waste no further time and examine the claim that teacher Shane makes regarding the inner veil being torn. Let's once again bring up Matthew 27. In verse 54, it says that the centurion and those who were with him saw the earthquake and what took place. What was it that took place? The verses before provide clear context that 6 events took place at the crucifixion of Jesus. 1. The veil was torn. 2. The earth shook. 3. The rocks split. 4. The tombs opened. 5. Many were resurrected. And 6. The resurrected went into the city and appeared to many. The verse says that the centurion saw all 6 of these events. Now, with all of this information that I've presented in mind, allow me to ask a simple question to Teacher Shane. How did the centurion, who is not a descendant of Aaron, who is physically standing at the Mount of Olives outside the gates at the crucifixion location, able to see the veil inside of the temple being torn? The answer is he can't. And the reason he can't is because it wasn't the inner veil that was torn, it was the outer veil that was torn. Let me give you a visual.
All right, so we are here in a 3D representation of the temple, and it's a one-to-one replication of what the second temple looked like. And up ahead, we can see the outer veil, which is the topic of discussion that we're looking at. This is from every possible temple source that you can think of, compiled into a one-to-one replica of the second temple. It really does not get any more accurate than this out there. This is even used in the scholarly world, especially the Second Temple Institute students. They use this. So we're actually dealing with scholarly level representations of the Second Temple here. And what we're facing is the outer veil, which we're discussing. Now you can see the designs on it. The reason why the creators of the app decided to put those designs on it is because there's some temple sources that say the design on the actual outer curtain was, the galaxies, the stars, the universe. So we don't know exactly what it really looked like. So they just kind of were a little creative and put the sun, the moon, some mountains, some stars as well. But the point I'm trying to get at is take a look, okay, at how tall this thing is. Okay, this is 80 feet tall and 4 inches thick. This is a gigantic curtain that we're looking at. This is the outer curtain, all right? Now, I'm going to turn around here. In this specific location where we're at here, the app doesn't have the mountains in the background, okay, or the big hills in the background. But guess what? We can go there, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to scroll down here, and we're going to go to the Mount of Olives. Somewhere, we're up in the air, as you can see, right? We're up in the air. Somewhere around here, our master was crucified, okay? And if we were to look up, what do we see? We see the temple. And from here, at this vantage point, we are clearly able to see the outer veil from here. Not only are we able to see the outer veil from here, we are able to see all the tombs, which is way down below there at the bottom of that hill crevice right there. And we can go there. We zoom in, we go to the tombs, and take a look. This is the tombs where the dead were buried, that the centurion and the witnesses of the crucifixion saw everybody being raised to life. So they were popping out of these tombs and running towards the city. So right here, we're facing technically the outer curtain here, but we can't see anything from here. Okay? This is not where Jesus was crucified. Jesus was crucified probably somewhere up on that hill right there. Probably up on that hill, to be honest. Somewhere right there where they can see the actual veil being torn. So let's go back to the Mount of Olives and finalize this here. Somewhere around here, our master was crucified. And what the centurion saw was the outer veil. It is impossible for the centurion or any of the witnesses to have seen the inner veil from here. How can you see the Holy of Holies as if it's wide open to begin with? You know what I mean? It's impossible. It's completely impossible. It was the outer veil that they saw.
I'll additionally very briefly address the core scriptures that this doctrine uses in the book of Hebrews to signify the torn veil was the inner veil. First, we must establish an irrefutable fact. Jesus cannot operate as the high priest on the earthly realm. Hebrews 8, verse 4. Now, if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the law. When the book of Hebrews mentions Jesus as our high priest, it is referencing him as our high priest in the heavenly tabernacle, not made with hands by the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 9:11-12. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. Hebrews 6:19-20 says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. As you can see, the book of Hebrews is consistently distinguishing between the earthly temple with the heavenly one. In the heavenly one, our Master has indeed entered the Holy of Holies and is at the right hand of the Father. He alone has that authority, not us. He is our mediator, and we are able to draw near with boldness by his blood through his flesh. To start teaching that we are now priests in the order of Melchizedek requires you to be on equal footing with Jesus and strip Jesus of his high priest office duties. Do you understand the level of blasphemy now? I'll get into more detail in the second part, but if you have ears to hear, take notice at the level of heresy. Lastly, we will use this final scripture to end it all. Hebrews 10:19-21. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh, and having an high priest over the house of God. This verse is one of the most dangerously mistranslated verses in the Bible. The word holiest in the verse is improperly translated and is inferred by the translators to be referencing the Holy of Holies. Many translations outright use the term Holy of Holies because of this. The word in the Greek is hagios, and it is singular, and it's only used one time in the verse, making it a total impossibility for the term to be, quote, Holy of Holies. This indicates an inference by the translators that was added into the text. The Holy of Holies was not the veil that was torn. I believe I provided more than enough information regarding which veil was torn. The fact that the mainstream Christian view which is a religion that does not understand the temple, does not understand the Torah, does not keep it, is what Teacher Shane utilizes as his source of his doctrine, simply does not compare with the historical sources or the Bible itself. You have mainstream Christianity's view on the temple mixed with conjecture versus historical evidence and direct Bible verses. I'll let you all decide what you consider sufficient. But I still demand an answer to my question. Teacher Shane, how did the centurion see the inner veil of the Holy of Holies being torn if he was outside of the gates on the Mount of Olives at the crucifixion? I await an answer. Shalom.
Be not carried about with diverse and strange doctrines,